I've been playing RPGs for a long time now, and when I think about it, there are a lot of terms and abbreviations associated with this genre that have crept into my vocabulary over these years. AOE, glass cannon, THACO, RNG, save scumming. Terms like these are thrown around a lot when talking about RPGs, but what do they all mean? This video is a glossary of RPG terminology and will look into the many terms regarding subgenres, gameplay, mechanics, and storytelling. Let me know which terms you learnt about or if I missed anything good. Alright, let's get into it. Not too many people know this, but RPG stands for role-playing game. More seriously, let's start diving into the many RPG subgenres. First, we have JRPG, and this stands for Japanese role-playing game because they're developed in Japan. But there are also loads of identifying features of JRPGs, which often include anime-style visuals and characters and a focus on narrative. Popular examples here include the Final Fantasy series and Dragon Quest. Next, we have WRPGs, which stands for Western role-playing games. As you would expect, these games are developed in Western countries, most commonly North America. These games often feature large open worlds and an emphasis on player freedom and choice. BioWare and Bethesda are perhaps the most well-known developers of WRPGs, which includes titles such as Mass Effect, Elder Scrolls, and Fallout. srpg stands for Strategy RPG. While this genre is most commonly developed in Japan, the focus here is on tactical grid-based combat. Many srpgs are known for their unforgiving difficulty, sometimes including permadeath. This is when a character dies for the rest of the game if they fall in battle. Fire Emblem, Disgaea, and Final Fantasy Tactics are some of the most well-known srpgs out there. CRPG stands for Computer Role-Playing Game, and while this originally referred to RPGs on PC, it now describes a specific subgenre of RPG. CRPGs are very stat-dependent, just like its tabletop D&D counterparts. There is typically an isometric view and often an emphasis on rich narratives and branching stories. Some of the most common examples of CRPGs include Baldur's Gate and Pillars of Eternity. A relatively new genre term going around is soulslike. This refers to gameplay and mechanics similar to From Software's Souls series. With these games, you can expect single character action combat with a focus on level exploration and difficult boss fights. Typically, if you die, you will have one single chance to regain your lost currency if you make it back to where you previously lost your life. Aside from the Souls series, Code Vein and Neo are popular examples of Souls-like RPGs. ARPG stands for Action RPG, and this purely refers to the combat system. This fast-paced combat usually has a player control a single character at a time with the ability to run around the battlefield, jumping, dodging, and unleashing combos. The Tales of and East series are popular examples of JRPGs with action combat. This is, of course, in contrast to turn-based combat, which gives the player the chance to stop and think about their next move, usually through the on-screen menus. Most classic RPGs from the Super Nintendo and PS1 eras use turn-based systems, including Earthbound and Chrono Cross. Final Fantasy IV changed things up a little here, however, with its ATB style, which stands for Active Time Battle. Each character would have to wait for their gauge to fill up before being able to perform a move, so naturally characters with a higher speed will have a faster bar and could therefore act more often. This system was seen in Final Fantasy IV, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 before the series returned to its turn-based roots in Final Fantasy X. The next genre is the dungeon crawler. These RPGs typically feature one single town with the majority of the game taking place in dungeons, or often a single dungeon with the goal of making your way to the deepest point. Diablo and Darkest Dungeon are popular examples of dungeon crawler RPGs. Next we have roguelikes, or is it roguelite? This genre refers to games similar to the 1980s classic Rogue, but it's the name of this genre that gets a bit confusing. In 2008, a bunch of dudes decided that in order for a game to be classified as roguelike, it needs to include most or all of specific factors. Some of these factors include permadeath, procedural generation, turn-based, grid-based, and offering multiple solutions. Because of these strict classification rules, most games of this genre started to be referred to as roguelites. Permadeath and procedurally generated maps are still key features here, but most modern games such as Hades has played around with the formula, including new elements such as carry over progression. Here is another subgenre you may have heard of. Metroidvania refers to games that are like Metroid and Castlevania. While these popular series are not really RPGs, some RPGs do feature Metroidvania mechanics such as the recent action RPG Eiyuden Chronicle Rising. The key characteristic with these games is its 2D gated exploration and progression, meaning as you progress through the game you'll find items and abilities that allow you to proceed through previously gated off areas. DPS stands for damage per second, and as the name suggests, this is how much damage a character can dish out every second. This is important when you factor in the speed of attacks with attack power. For example, a warrior wielding a giant axe may have a huge attack power but may only hit every few seconds. On the other hand, a thief with a knife may have a low attack power but attack twice every second. So, which one deals more damage? That is where a DPS value comes in handy. But life isn't all about dishing out damage. Sometimes you'll need to provide support, and what better way to do this than providing your party with buffs? These abilities are designed to make your character stronger, such as increasing their attack power or speed. Debuffs are similar, except that they are designed to make the enemy weaker, such as decreasing their magic defense. Now, some RPGs have loads of playable characters, some of which are much more useful in battle than others. There are often characters that are exceptionally strong, so much so that they make the game much easier than it should be. These characters are often referred to as OP or overpowered. A good example of this is the Dinosaurus in Ni no Kuni, which puts the game's other familiars to shame. But in this modern era of frequent patches, OP characters are often nerfed. This means that the overall effectiveness is reduced. Developers often do this to make the game a little more balanced. Similarly, patches can also increase the effectiveness of characters, which is also called buffing. Let's get into some character classes, starting with the tank. This type of character is designed to be your meat shield, that is, take as much damage as possible. Tank-like classes can often equip shields such as knights and paladins. Aside from being in the front row during combat, tanks often have skills and abilities that increase their aggro, and this is often seen in MMORPGs. And if you don't know what MMO stands for, it is massively multiplayer online. These are games like Final Fantasy XIV. Anyway, aggro is a mechanic that causes your enemies to prioritize which character to attack. A tank should therefore generate a lot of aggro, while your healers should not. Another term you may have heard is glass cannon. This refers to characters who can output exceptionally large amounts of damage but can die very easily. Monks or mages such as Vivi from Final Fantasy IX can often be classified this way. D&D refers to Dungeons & Dragons, the tabletop RPG first published in 1974. D&D features loads of unique mechanics that can be found in many RPGs, most commonly in CRPGs such as Planescape Torment. One term often associated with D&D based games is AC, which stands for Armor Class. Despite what the name suggests, AC does not directly reduce incoming damage as an RPG armor value typically would. Instead, Armor Class determines the chance of being hit, with a low number like 0 being much better than a higher armor class like 8. Then there is THACO, which stands for 2-hit Armor Class 0. This refers to the chance of hitting an opponent with a hypothetical armor class of 0. Confused yet? Yeah, I recommend doing some research before playing D&D style RPGs. Now, have you ever heard of the term vanilla games? And no, I'm not talking about the developers of 13 Sentinels Vanillaware, or the most boring flavor of ice cream in existence. With that said, the ice cream flavor is actually where this term originated. Vanilla refers to the original version of the game. In modern times, RPGs often receive loads of patches and updates, or even mods, which are fan-made alterations to the game. The vanilla version of a game is the version that was initially released. World of Warcraft is an example of a game that has seen massive changes over its 18-year lifespan. In fact, in 2019, Blizzard actually re-released this vanilla version to the public under the title WoW Classic. Similar to vanilla is OG, which stands for Original Gangster. OG games refer to the original old school game, not the re-releases, ports, remasters, reboots, or remakes. Final Fantasy VII is a great example here. OG FF7 was released in 1997 on the PS1. Anything else is not OG. I am sure you've all heard of AAA games. This refers to games with high budgets, usually distributed by high-profile publishers such as Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft. Some AAA RPGs include the mainline Final Fantasy games and Cyberpunk 2077. This is in contrast to indie RPGs, which often have very different definitions depending where you look. Generally, these indie games are made by smaller teams with smaller budgets and are generally able to experiment and try new things out without publishers giving them a blueprint to mainstream success. What better example than Undertale, which was made by one single person? Now, somewhere in this video, I have to talk about the Golden Age. When we talk about a Golden Age, we're talking about a time period of prosperity and achievement. In relation to JRPGs, it is widely agreed to be the 90s. Here, we have countless titles that made the genre popular, and these titles are still considered to be the best games of the genre ever. I'm talking about Super Nintendo titles such as Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy 4-6, and Secret of Mana, to PS1 masterpieces such as Xenogears, Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, and Suikoden 2. Since then, things haven't quite been the same. If you've played an RPG, you will no doubt be familiar with NPC, standing for non-player or non-playable character. These are characters that you do not control, such as the many generic townspeople that populate your favorite city streets. The hub refers to the central location from which your character can venture out into different areas of the game. In RPGs, it is often a safe place full of NPCs and shops. The towns in the Monster Hunter series is a great example of this, as it is the one place that you can upgrade your character, take on quests, and talk to the many townspeople. Super bosses refer to optional bosses that can usually be found during the end game, which is very late in the game, or the post game, which is after the credits roll. These bosses are typically the most difficult in the game, even more so than the final story boss. An example of this is the Ozma weapon from Final Fantasy IX. RNG stands for Random Number Generator, and this refers to the algorithm that produces random numbers used for a variety of random events in the game. This could be enemy attack patterns, the chance of encountering certain enemies, or the chance of item drops. Trying to obtain an item with a low RNG drop rate can be one of the most frustrating things in an RPG. Next is Karma. These systems take the player's actions and choices into account, which has an impact on future events. For instance, if you're a complete asshole, your karma value would be low and certain characters may not join your party. Grinding refers to repetitively completing the same task to achieve a desired outcome. Repetitively completing the same task to achieve a desired outcome. This is most commonly associated with leveling up characters, where you need to repetitively defeat the same or similar enemies in order to gain EXP to level up and get stronger. Grinding can also be done to acquire particular item drops or earn lots of gold. Some people love it, some people hate it, but either way, it is a staple of many role-playing games. Save scumming refers to manually saving the game just before a difficult or risky part of the game. If you don't achieve the desired outcome, simply reload your game and try again. A player may want to save scum just before an RNG event, or perhaps just before putting all of your money on the table at a casino. Let's be honest, we have all done this and we are not ashamed. As you progress through any RPG, your character is going to get stronger, usually through leveling up. Level scaling is a term used when enemies also level up in relation to the character's level. Many Western RPGs use level scaling, but a popular JRPG example is Final Fantasy VIII. There is nothing more reassuring than an RPG auto-saving every few minutes. If you die, who cares? You can just reload your game with only minimal amounts of progression lost. But this was not always the case. We used to have save points, and save points alone. If the last save point was an hour ago and you die, or the power goes out, you have lost a precious hour of your time. I tell ya, kids these days will never understand. Shin Megami Tensei 5 5 is one of the rare examples of a modern RPG that only has save points. The term padding refers to things that stretch out a game's length so they can brag about having 100 hours of gameplay. This often involves quests that do nothing to progress the main storyline. Sometimes there are even forced side quests that pad out the game's length by hours, such as Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Torna the Golden Country. Now, let's talk about some of the terms that relate to RPG stories. First up, we have the lore dump. This is when a game shoves loads of information down your throat regarding the story, lore, history, politics, characters, or anything relating to the narrative. Rather than delivering this information thoughtfully throughout the story, it is often dumped in your face as text or dialogue at the start or early in the game. Next, we have Deus Ex Machina, the plot device used to save the day in a seemingly hopeless situation. This is often considered very poor writing. Deus Ex Machina happens so many times in Trails of Cold Steel 2. Here you beat a boss who then claims that we're just going easy on you, and just before said boss destroys the party, powerful allies suddenly appear from nowhere to save the day. Then there's the amnesia plotline. This is where the main character has lost their memories, so their knowledge of themselves aligns with the players who, just like Jon Snow, knows nothing. Now, while this one is heavily criticized, some of the best gaming stories ever told use this amnesia plotline. Xenogears and Planescape Torment feature main characters who have forgotten their past, but it is just this that sets up for two of the best stories of all time. Now, I can't end this video without talking about the power of friendship. This power allows the characters to fight against massive threats and surpass any hurdle in their way due to their inner power of friendship. What better example of this than in Kingdom Hearts, where the bonds that Sora has with his friends give him the power to accomplish anything. On that note, together we can accomplish anything. If we put all our hearts together right now and hit the like, share and comment button, this video can achieve anything. Let's give it a try, friends. This was Hellfire RPGs. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, hit like and sub for more RPG content. See you next time.